Welcome to our weekly Governance Voice. This is a program brought to you courtesy of the Institute of Certified Secretaries, powered by Bafunde. I am your host, Obare Nyaega. The program brings together governance experts and leaders of industry to discuss on various issues dealing with governance and leadership. This morning, we are privileged and lucky to have Dr. Wyne Mutuma speaking to us about ethical leadership. Speaking a little bit about Dr. Wyne Mutuma, he is currently a partner at Kihara and Wyne Advocates and also a senior lecturer, University of Nairobi School of Law. He has a PhD, an LLM, LLB, and a Bachelor's of Architectural Studies. Part of his professional qualifications is that he's a chartered arbitrator, he's an accredited governance auditor, he's a member of the Architectural Association of Kenya, and also an advocate of the High Court. Karibu sana, Daktari.
I thank you very, very much, Bwana CEO. It's a pleasure to be on this program. I have been following it quite closely, and I congratulate you on the rich subscription that you're receiving.
Thank you so much. Probably before we dive too much into the detail of ethical leadership, why are you very passionate about ethics in the first place?
Oh, that's, I think, a simple one for me. The engine of everything, the heart of change, the ability of us to achieve whatever we want to achieve is rooted in ethics. Mm-hmm. Ethics is at the center of every governance principle that you can think about. Mm-hmm. And my inspiration and my pursuit and passion in this area stems from that very simple principle that if you get the ethics right, mm-hmm. everything else will fall in place.
All right. So what will you call ethical leadership?
Well, that is a compound phrase. It's, of course, it has ethics in it, mm-hmm. ethical, and it has leadership. We all know leadership is about influence. Okay. It's how you influence followers. You get people to move towards a certain vision, and you persuade them. Ethics is really about the heart of how the leader does that. Mm-hmm. The moral compass that the leader uses, the sense of rightness and the sense of wrongness. So if you put those two words, mm-hmm. ethical leadership is about a leadership that is based mm-hmm. on a compass that's not broken, a compass that aligns to the true north okay. and influences the followers towards moving in that direction.
All right.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of legislation around ethics. You're a lawyer and you can speak to very many of them. Are there specific ones you think that Kenya has gotten right in terms of either putting down as codes or as law?
Well, you're right. Kenya certainly does not have any gaps when it comes to making laws. We are highly, I think the lawyers have occupied a very big space in our society, both in parliament and other structures, and that is evident in this particular area, our constitution. Mm-hmm. Is the greatest example of what you'd call progressive in matters of ethics. We've got an Article 10 that is elaborate with national values. When you look at those values, you look mm-hmm. at transparency, accountability, the idea of human rights and participation, inclusivity. All of those are ethical issues. When you look at several other chapters in that constitution, chapter 6, that deals with leadership and of course, you find a huge amount of ethical pronouncements in that regard. When you look at the public sector and how it's to be run, mm-hmm. when you look at statutory instruments that follow and build up on what the Constitution, the general tone mm-hmm. of the Constitution, again, you find they are very centered on ethics. Mm-hmm. The Leadership and Integrity Act, Public Officer Ethics Act, and I mean, you could go on economic crimes and Act, the EACC. So as far as the law is concerned, okay. there are no deficits. We have very well endowed okay. in that area.
Right. Is it a reflection of something when you have so many laws talking about the issues of ethics, in your view?
I think it's a reflection of what we aspire to do. Okay. But aspiration and actually getting there, those are two different things. Right. I'm sure you've seen in different buildings, all the aspirations, when you look at the statements, the visions. The one that I like very much is when you see this is the no corruption go zone area. So you see the aspirations are there, but whether they actually translate into lived realities,
yes,
that is the big question. Yeah.
All right. So if that is a big question, so do we need to codify them? Do we just need to have them in a different format?
Yeah, well, this is where I often think the problem is, and I can tell you, lawyers are very good at that. We think that every problem can be fixed by law, legislation, codifications. I'm not really convinced that that is where the solution lies. I think we need to ask deeper questions. There's a very interesting tool that I engage with as a practitioner in this area. It's known as the Ken Wilber's 4 Integral Framework. The heart of it is to simply ask, are we focusing on trying to address behavior, trying to address it through laws, or are we moving this one thing one step further to the internal dimension that prompts or causes the problem? I think about it in a different way, CS Obare. A tree, and if you're trying to deal with a tree and you have a nuisance nearby it, the tree is throwing all kinds of leaves onto your yard, and you say, no, I must cut this tree. You can go to the top and look very, very busy cutting the branches. That indeed will be, for the show of works, very commendable. People will say, here is a very diligent person, but that will not solve the problem. You have to go to the underlying roots. What is not visible, not the leaves, not the branches, but the underlying roots. Once you deal with the taproot, I like using that phrase, the taproot, that tree will fall. Every other exercise is commendable, maybe even communicative to everybody of being diligent. I think that's what we've been doing as Kenya. We've been dealing with the branches, with the flowers, with the leaves. No one has the time to ask the big question, why unethical? Why corruption? Why? And so forth. Deal with the roots and you've solved the problem.
Okay. So how would we then balance the laws we have and dealing with the problem as you have suggested?
I'm not sure whether I can draw on my own personal experiences professionally in this regard, because we are not negating the importance of the law. The law is only as good as it's effective. So when you look at our laws and you ask very simple questions, when the sanction that is provided for in law comes to play and you're dealing with corruption or unethical practices, does it actually happen? And you know that if you have a very good piece of legislation, but it never ever sees the light of day when it's contravened, it's as good as, paying lip service to that particular instrument. When you look at the law, and the law shouldn't only be viewed from a sanction perspective, you also need to see the other side. I mean, many of us talk about a carrot and a stick approach. What about those people that are abiding with the law? What do we do with them as a society? Those companies, those corporate entities that are walking the talk and living shoulder above all of these unethical practices. What about individuals? When we get to the national awards, I get very, very curious. Who is going to be commended? What about the people who are appointed in boards? What is their fabric? What is their quality? Now that gets me very curious, because all the laws that you have, without being evidently translated into our everyday realities, you are looking at a bulldog without teeth.
You've mentioned about corruption almost twice, and there's someone who has given an analogy that most of us have a tendency to be corrupt, and probably is the opportunity we don't have. Are we saying that our culture is so on the negative of ethics that anybody given an opportunity, or a majority given an opportunity, they are likely to fall into unethical conduct?
So there are two things there that are very interesting that you've mentioned. The first is a reflection that came. I think there was a research that was done 3, 4, 5 years ago. The youth were asked exactly that question about what they aspire to be. And they said, we will be just as corrupt, if not more. I mean, they were being asked about legitimate aspirations professionally. And they gave a very real answer.
Mm-hmm.
They said, the people that we see rewarded in this society, the ones that we see driving big cars, holding senior offices, are those that have been corrupt. So the idea, we used to have this very interesting song we sang in our younger days, so many vijana.
Yes.
Mwisho wa kusoma utapata kazi nzuri sana. They said all of that just doesn't wash.
Mm-hmm.
Let me make money quickly in the most corrupt manner. That was a very shocking research that came. The second idea that you've put across is the word, it comes from the word culture. Culture. Now, culture has two elements in it. So it has a time element that if you do something consistently, repetitively, without interruptions over a long period of time,
Mm-hmm.
then something starts to crystallize about that thing. The other element, of course, is the mind.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe what you're doing is the way it should be done,
Mm-hmm.
then you have the two major components of culture. People now start to accept that's how business is done. I'm afraid in many, many respects, that's what has happened to our country. We've done the wrong things so many times that we've come to accept what is wrong as what is right. Now, that's terrible. That's a broken compass.
Mm. So let's push that to ask, and then in terms of probably once you understand the consequences of unethical behavior, probably it might help. And I'm sure you've come across examples, you've come across experiences where the consequences are not as attractive. Maybe you could share some of these examples of how unethical behavior can really affect organizations or individuals.
Let's go back to base. Every time you're unethical, you're dealing with an internal consistency inside you.
Mm-hmm.
When you tell a lie, the whole world believes the lie, except one person, yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is you are conflicted.
Okay.
In fact, I think psychologists and the medical practitioners will
Mm-hmm.
say that at the individual level, a huge problem erupts. You start to develop a sense of disharmony and the complete destruction of your internal balance. That's the first cost. That doesn't stop there, because you can go at every level of the human ecosystem. So if you look at families, for example, where there's unethical practice and unethical behavior,
Mm-hmm.
Spouses, husbands and wives, children and parents, we haven't quantified the
Mm-hmm.
cost of that. The cost in terms of their social well-being,
Mm-hmm.
their psychological and emotional state. And I tend to use a very good example. So I had a child at a certain stage. He was a bit, the children get to, I think, 6, 7, 8, and they discover that you can tell a lie. And sometimes they tell lies for no reason at all. And this young child at that stage was telling lies.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one time sitting up with my wife and discussing this, and we said, they brought a report form, and the report form had A's and all of that. And well, that's what we were told. And we told my wife, do we need to do a forensic, analysis of this report form? Look at that cost. Look at the cost of when your partner is elsewhere. We're seated here, and we're both, of course, married. Our spouses are not asking, did the CS Obare actually go to the studio? Think about that emotional turmoil. Then move up to the corporate level. Think about all that we've seen in the public and the private sector. We're talking about corporations. The non-profit sector is not left out.
Mm-hmm.
Questions of public interests, question about internal controls and how funds have been used. insider trading. All those are ethical issues. So think about society. Pick a newspaper. Follow a story of a bus that has killed, we've seen it in the past, several number of people.
Yes.
That bus passed checkpoints. There were police in those checkpoints, and this happened. Think about the ferries and everything that we're reading about. What about our agricultural society? And there was one time, this was really ludicrous. Kenyans started abstaining from sugar. You remember the mercury incident?
Yes.
And we thought they were adopting a new lifestyle. No, they were worried that the sugar might be contaminated. Think about education. And today we ask our students, are you pre-Matiang'i or are you post-Matiang'i? Because the number of A's that people used to get before this particular minister came into the fore were so many, and then they suddenly reduced. Was it that the students became less bright after? No. The truth is that there was a lot of cheating that was happening. And you can go across different sectors. You will find the cost, the competitive cost, the cost in terms of legacy, the cost in terms of doing business is extremely astronomical.
Okay. So I want you to probably talk about how and then can we manage this. And I say this also using the example of your experience, especially when you are you've been involved in the Mandela Foundation, and probably speak about it a little bit and actually just say, what are these lessons we can learn to begin managing what you are painting as really a serious situation? I mean, from family level all the way to corporate.
It's good that you should mention the Mandela Foundation. I think if there was a pivotal period that affected my life enormously, it was the period that I worked for the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And I'll say why, because it's related to the question that you've asked. I was able to study leadership and how leadership is the key to this problem. So all of us know about Madiba, as is fondly known about, spoken of, that he had an agenda and he was seeking to bring reconciliation in the country. Now, how did he do that? He went and invited all of his nemesis into the same space that he was. So he had coffee and tea with the widow of Farwood, the actual architect of apartheid. He made one of his jailers his deputy president, and he made the other trying to get a more favorable term to use, but there was a chief from KZN that brought enormous problems to him. I wouldn't elaborate that, but that was the second deputy president. He went beyond that. He went into rugby fields that were predominantly the domain of whites as a sport, and inspired and participated in something that they never ever wanted to, or the black people never wanted to have a hand in. What was he doing? He was doing the most important form of intervention when it comes to changing society, modeling. He presented himself as the speech, as the vision, as the way that things can be changed. And I'm reminded of Mahatma Gandhi's famous quotation that I'm not sure if I am quoting right, but he says, "Be the change that you want to see." And someone else, I can't remember which particular author, said that we are the ones that we have been waiting for. So Mandela did that so well. And there, for me, is the solution. The message that the leaders are speaking is more than their words. It is their life. Someone said the problem, why I can't hear what you're saying, is your actions are speaking louder than your words.
So just to ask, because you're in this country as well, just as you're being to say, is it possible this transformation that you've seen Mandela bring, do you see it being possible here? Do you see that change coming? Do you see those people around that you can pick and say, this person can bring what I think I saw elsewhere?
I think it's possible. I think there are a critical mass of individual Kenyans that are doing outstanding things. The problem is they don't get coverage. They are not brought to the limelight. And of course, to inspire people, you must be given the platform. Think about this gentleman. I mean, we had someone receive an award of the best teacher. He was here amongst us. And of course, what is so sad is that he required international acknowledgement before we are acknowledged that we are this individual here. It reminds me of the biblical text that a prophet is not is accepted everywhere else except his home.
Yes.
Think about our famous Nobel laureate, Professor Wangari Maathai, a personal hero of mine.
Mm-hmm.
For a very long time, she was here and she was doing what she was doing with such passion. She had no acknowledgement. And one day we wake up and we're all lining up the street for her. She's coming from Oslo with the award. And where are those individuals? I'd like to say that they're here with us. Give them space.
Okay.
Let their stories be told. And slowly, we will start to transform the society.
Right.
Yeah.
You indicated that you were trained by the Nelson Mandela Foundation. How, do you advise that also most of us go through some training maybe? And if possible, who should be doing this kind of training locally, if at all?
Well, I really think at the heart of changing minds and attitudes certainly is capacity development. That's a very important component. How it's done, that's a different story. This is not something that is an information download. So ethics is not something that I stand. You mentioned I'm a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. That you stand in front with a blackboard and chalk and paper or a PowerPoint and say, these are the ethical principles and this is how you should live. That is not the kind of training we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We need training that is as near to the real thing as possible. So there are people who do this through simulations, through long-term, training that's not event-based, but is process-based. Training that focuses on exposing individuals to ways of actually achieving the desired end, proscriptive and prescriptive, the so-called you must not or you must, and the incentivization approach, because not everything can be put in rules, like you were saying. You must be able to inspire people. That's the heart of leadership. Inspire them to do what is right. Inspire them to be caring. Inspire them to be accountable. Inspire them. All these principles that we talk about in ethics, that component of incentivizing people is so key. And that's, again, a different form of training.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's a rare question I ask gentlemen about families. So if you may allow me to also dive into that, you began by saying that the basic unit. You like to share about your basic unit as well? And maybe how you mentor it? I don't know.
I think if there is anything that I feel so proud of is speaking about my family. One, through family, I think I understand the power of a woman. So it's my wife is not here. But I can tell you, I think there's a text somewhere in the good old book that says a wise woman builds her house. There's an adage again where they say behind every successful man, there's a woman. So every achievement that I've had to make in my life has certainly had a shadow behind me, prompting me. As a father, of course, I'm a father of 3 children that I love very dearly. And I have a mixture of a mentorship and a friendship with them. I believe that you have to get the right mix. You want them to be friends so that things are on the table. You know, they go through their different phases. Life is a constantly changing game. So they go through their teenage ages. They move from that. They get into the university. You want to know what they're doing, both good and bad. Mm-hmm. Now, the bad will only come if you're a friend. But you have to be more than that. I don't subscribe to a lot of modern thinking that just says that you are buddy-buddy with your children. You're a mentor. You're responsible for these people. So you have to be able to demonstrate to them. My daughter is currently doing law. And I'd like to believe, as she tells me, that somewhere along the line that I inspired her to do that. So that takes us back again to what you're saying. My biggest desire is that my life lived at home is a reflection of everything that we're having here, because the stakes are big at home. The stakes are of the legacy that you leave with the children. And I hope I will continue to inspire them to greater heights.
Thank you for sharing that story. I hope one day we'll talk more and learn more about, those things that we want to do, modernizing families, and maybe what you are calling, you have a way of looking at it. Thank you for sharing that story. Probably as we wind down is just to request you to look at the camera there and share with us your final remarks, your closing remarks, be it ethical, whichever way, and anything else that you may want to share with us from your experiences, please feel free.
Thank you very much, CEO. I think my first remark is that we are walking letters, books, and ethics is really about what people read, not so much in what you say, but how you live. My second, of course, is that that requires courage. Many times we ask, why do good people do bad things? The simple answer to that is the courage to do what's right is not, it's not exactly a piece of cake. When you stop by a policeman and you know that if I part with this, in 5 minutes I'll be gone. And if I hold to my values, I might end up in court and experience delays. That requires a lot of courage. The last, of course, is that you must be true to yourself. The person that is in the village, the one that is in the sitting room, I dare say even the bedroom, is the same one that will be in the office. And the problem with being inconsistent is that you can't hold out for too long. If you are duplicit and if you've got a sense of hypocrisy, it's a house of cards, it always collapses. So I encourage all of us, and including myself, that what you see is what you get in all the spheres that we operate. Hopefully with that, we'll have a great country, we'll have great corporations, we'll have very, very successful families and individuals that make up all of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daktari, for coming and sharing those words of wisdom with us. We truly, truly are honored and appreciated.
Thank you very much, CEO. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the Dr. Wyne talking to us about ethical leadership on our weekly Governance Voice. This is a program brought to you courtesy of the Institute of Certified Secretaries, powered by Bafunde. I am your host, Obare Nyaega. Until next week, see you.